Arthur, what was your reaction when you heard that this woman had been arrested?
It was quite disappointing. It was quite taken back because this is the first lady to be a target of this crackdown. But we've seen obviously many other people arrested, passports cancelled, confiscated in the past. And so we see this as part of a series of moves by the police and the government to crack down on Muslims travelling to Syria.
Why do you say it's a crackdown?
It's a crackdown because the government's putting all its resources and power to stop Muslims from doing this. And obviously I use the word crackdown because it's something that we feel is unjustified. It's morally unjustified, and also we feel that although the legislation is being put as the justification for this, it's really just a case of the government hiding behind that legislation. And I say that because we've seen that this very same legislation has not been used elsewhere where the text of legislation clearly applies.
Is it a responsible act for a mother to take her children to the Middle East if the intention is to get close to or indeed to travel to Syria?
Well, that depends on the individual cases. I mean, Syria is a large country. Obviously, there's a particular context there right now, but individuals can only decide for themselves whether moving to a particular place is right or wrong for them. For us, what's important, obviously, the government's not coming here from a perspective of whether this individual is putting themselves in danger or not. We know that the government sends its troops and fighter jets and B-52 bombers, to Afghanistan, to Iraq, to elsewhere, and that's fine, that's okay, those incursions are fine. But if a Muslim wants to go to support, it's a selfless sacrifice in the end, to support someone, support the oppressed, then all of a sudden that's wrong somehow. So this is the point. And I condemn very strongly arrests of this sort because they essentially criminalise support for the oppressed.
How would you describe, what's your sense of the community's feeling today about the arrest?
Well, the community is also shocked about this in a sense, not that it's unexpected, but that now even females are being targeted, women are being targeted in front of their kids. I think this is a new low for the AFP. But the community generally feels very targeted. It feels discriminated against on this point, and obviously in the broader context of the war on terror, because we keep being told there's this law and this is wrong and this is right and this is not, but all of it's applied very selectively. When Muslims travelled to Libya 2 years ago, that was a foreign incursion. The text of lesson applied there, but the AFP was asleep on the job, I guess. The government turned a blind eye. Afghanistan in the late 80s, same thing. People know Muslims went from across the West and everyone just turned a blind eye in terms of governments and the police. Now we're being told, oh my God, violence is not justified, you can't do this, we're worried about your safety. I mean, it's all nonsense.
Isn't it the role of government to look after the safety of its citizens if it believes that it's acting in their best interests?
Yeah, but this is the point. If it was doing that, there would be a consistency, and we'll be told, look at this war, everyone stay back. Number one, their own troops. But that's not what's happening. There are certain conflicts where it's fine, people can travel, people are encouraged to travel, whether explicitly or implicitly. And there's others where all of a sudden where the opposite rule is applied quite harshly.
Which conflicts are you talking about?
Well, what we've seen, as I said in the past, in Afghanistan, the fight against the Soviets was not only supported by Western governments across the board, but it was celebrated, and they were called the Mujahideen, and it was a positive all round in terms of what was the spin from the government and the media in Australia, in the UK, in the US. I'll give an example already of Libya and other uprisings. So it is not an issue of safety anymore. If anyone's looking across the board and studying this issue, this is a case of if the conflict has the sanction, has the stamp of Western governments, and in our case of the Australian government, then it's okay. But if it doesn't have the stamp, and if Muslims travelling there does not fit within the agenda of the government, then all of a sudden we're told, well, it's the law and this and that.
Do you accept the premise of the argument that one of the reasons they try and stop people going is the concern not so much about what they do there, but how they will behave upon their return?
Yeah, well, this is what we see. We see one argument, if that doesn't work, well, how about this? When Muslims come back, they're going to be radicalised, and oh my Lord, we don't know what's going to happen. This argument is, it's a broken record. It's based on Islamophobic Orientalist narratives about Muslims being somehow less civilised, less able to distinguish than the white man, if you will, between a war zone and Australian suburbia. It's ridiculous. Why? So if a Muslim goes, what about Australian troops when they come back? They start blowing things up left, right, and centre. So the point is, these are the serious issues that are not debated. And all we're told, as today George Brand has come out and said, I remind the Muslim community again that you'll be prosecutable if you go to Syria. Well, I remind George Brandis that you are hiding behind the legislation. Come out and explain to the people why it is wrong for people to sacrifice their life, their wealth, their time, their effort to go and support the oppressed abroad.
Okay. Is there anything you haven't said that you'd like to say?
The only other thing I'd add is to say that I'd remind the Muslim community not to be intimidated, because the point of these tactics, these policies from the government, is to intimidate and to silence. So I call upon the Muslim community to continue speaking out against tyranny abroad and locally here in Australia, and to continue supporting those who are oppressed around the world.